you sanitize?
Choice 1, 3rd of September 2020, second environment lesson. Action.
Oh no, that's my thing. Yeah, okay. As long as you can like touch the top. Okay, right. Sitting down, focused. Moving on. Yep. Amongst other things. Okay, right, moving on. Okay, getting rid of cell phones and moving on. Okay, you are 100% happy that you understand this term carrying capacity. Okay, Joshua? Okay. And it's important that you realize this indefinitely or for at least a long term. We're not talking about this year. There's extremely good rainfall and therefore there's good plant growth, etc. And the impala population is huge this year or whatever. And that's the carrying capacity. That's not the carrying capacity. Okay, you happy? All right, next homework, go. Don't look sad. Okay, so complete classwork activity number 2 on pages 278 to 280 of your textbook. I know that the instruction says do it in groups. Nope, you're doing it on your own. And I suggest you take a photograph of the book. What's the matter? What does that mean? Okay, right, going. Everyone happy? Joshua, what are we eating now? No, but remember, we're not allowed to have crunchy things. I'm sure the kids next to you can. Can you hear them? Really? Are you not going to support me on this issue? Who marks your tests and exams? Okay, right, going. You all got this? Okay. All right. Next thing. Reproductive strategies. Okay. And there are 2 different reproductive strategies. So I'll flip from the slides and I'll come back and I'll do some definitions. So let's go. Here we've got the first kind of reproductive strategy where you consider that this organism, this is probably a toad or a frog, has laid all of these eggs, and these are a whole lot of tadpoles that emerged from the eggs, and there are many, 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 many of them, and they are small, and there's little or no parental care, and there's a very high mortality rate. Generally speaking, they mature very early, very few survive. Okay, R strategy. Lowercase r. Lowercase r. Oh, no. So this is not the abbreviation for that. This is, there are 2 different kinds of reproductive strategies. The one is an R strategy, and there's no big word for this. This is an R strategy, yeah. Okay. And later on, hopefully this will make a lot of sense to you. Later on down the line, this very often refers to pioneer species. At the moment, you don't really know what pioneer species are, but we will get back to that. Okay, Right, so going. Connor, focused. The other kind of strategy is K strategy. And this is very confusing because this one's a capital K and this one's a lowercase r. And you've got to get it right. Okay, so what you can remember is carrying capacity is also K and it's uppercase. So all of the K's are uppercase. But R, when we talk about R strategy, lowercase. And this is shown by birds and by mammals. Low number of offspring. The offspring are generally large. There's parental care. Low mortality rate. These organisms tend to mature much, much later. And many individuals survive. K strategy. Okay. All right. So what you need to look at here is time and energy input. So humans. Okay, ready, steady, go. Reproductive strategy of humans is Lamia. K or R?
K.
Okay. So humans don't have very many offspring. Okay. Let's even go back 100 years when a family would quite often have 8 offspring. Okay. But if you consider nowadays, for example, especially, very few offspring. But even 8 offspring is not a lot of offspring in an individual's lifetime. Okay. So very few offspring. The offspring are large. When that thing emerges from the vagina, it is large. Okay, it's not like a tadpole. Parental care occurs. So a huge energy input goes into looking after these little brats. Okay, and so what does that mean? There's a low mortality rate. Okay. These things, especially because there's a high degree of parental care, they mature quite late. So if you consider humans, for example, at what stage would you consider a human mature and able to reproduce itself? Is about 18, more or less, 18. Okay, more or less. Don't go and tell your parents I said you could go and do that. I never said that. But I'm talking about, in general, you would be a feasible... that's quite the scariest thing I've ever heard. Okay. You could go out and give birth to offspring at about age 18 if you're a human. Okay. And many, many individuals survive. You very seldom hear of human children dying for whatever reason. You very seldom hear about it. Okay. So you're all happy with a K strategy. So what is this animal? Good, as long as you don't think it's a leopard. Okay, and the offspring born big, low number of offspring at a time, so they might have 4, but in a lifetime, maybe about 10 is a high number. Parental care is, the offspring are large, parental care is very good, low mortality rate, late maturity, many individuals survive. And here we've got a penguin, 2 penguins with their offspring. Okay, you happy with that? Go back and compare it to our strategy. Large number of offspring are produced. Okay, offspring are very small, and if there's a large number of offspring produced, the individual can't have big offspring, because if they're popping out 500 offspring or 500 eggs, they can't be the equivalent size of a human baby to a human adult, because they can't have that many eggs if they're that big. Little or no parental care, so they lay the eggs in the water. After that, they normally just swim off and leave them to develop on their own little lonesome. High mortality rate, early maturity, very few survive. You know there's a high mortality rate because the earth is not overrun with frogs. So in general, only about 2 survive to produce the next generation out of all of these. Otherwise, frog populations would be increasing, but they're not. Yep.
So now, what would you consider seahorses? Because they have like a whole bunch of babies, but they look after them for a long time.
So there are in-betweens, and I think that what you need to consider is how many of those offspring survive. So, no. I would say they're on a continuum between R and K. They're closer to R than they are to K. Right, you're happy with that? And there is a continuum in between them. Okay, so you would have to be able to apply this terminology. And again, it's exactly like when I said to be able to define a population. They will give you a scenario where they'll tell you blah, 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 story, story, story. And then they will say to you, is this an example of an R or a K strategy? You have to know the definition. Then you can say it's an R strategy because blah, 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 or it's a K strategy because blah, blah, blah. So you would need to know all of these things to be able to answer that question. Okay, right, everybody happy? And this is just some comparisons. Okay, so R strategies, small size of organism, large size of organism, energy, and this generally refers to offspring. Energy used to make each individual is low, it's high, many offspring, very few, early maturity, later maturity, short life expectancy, long life expectancy. Each individual may reproduce only once, but it's possible to do more, generally more than once per lifetime. And we're going to talk about survivorship patterns just now. All right, everybody happy? Okay. Give me 3 examples of parental care in a type of organism that is normally considered R strategy. And we've got one from Liv. We said seahorses do show parental care. And you know that because you know that the male seahorse keeps them inside a little pouch on the ventral surface. Okay, ready, steady, go.
Yeah. Could you say spiders?
No, you can't hate spiders. No. Some spiders, good degree of parental care. So they'll keep them in the web until they reach a certain size, and then they're big enough to eat, so then they disperse. Okay. Come on. Yes, go.
I'm going to say, don't some crocodiles keep the babies in their mouth?
I wouldn't say crocodiles,
And
but there are some fish that do. So some cichlid fish, for example, are mouth brooders. So the eggs, they keep the eggs in the mouth, and when the young hatch, they live in generally the male's mouth, and then they will go out and swim in the water, and as soon as there's danger, they all swim back into daddy's mouth, and dad keeps them there. Okay, good, go.
Couldn't you say those little Nemo fish, they keep them in their anemones, so like they have the eggs and then they keep all the babies in their anemones?
I don't think that the parents do it as a parental care thing, though. Yeah. Yep, go.
Now, are you saying that, are these the one that are shaped? So like eggs?
Yes. Yes. So in some cases, animals that you would expect to be R strategy because they have lots of offspring and the offspring are small, so everything is like very R strategy. But there are some good examples of parental care amongst those. Okay. So when I said to you there's a continuum, they would be here on the continuum of R because they do show a little bit of parental care. So I'm not saying it's this or it's that. There's some in between. Yeah.
what would you say about ants?
I would say R, but here.
These?
R, but here. Okay. Yeah, so there are lots of really, really interesting things with fish, and there are lots of really interesting ones with frogs. Okay, so a midwife toad, for example, the eggs get wrapped around the male's hind legs, and he swims around with the eggs for a while. But then when they become tadpoles, then he doesn't look after them anymore. Okay, so here's the continuum thing. And you have to realize that there is such a thing as a continuum. Okay, so very, very R strategy. Oysters. Oysters, each oyster is able to reproduce about 500 million offspring per year. Okay, so that's extreme R strategy. And there's no parental care going there. Right, fish, frog, hare, large cat like a puma, and a chimpanzee, one offspring every 5 years, and a very high degree of parental care. Okay, so very K strategy. Lowercase, uppercase. Right. Okay. So now what I want you to do is I want you to work on your homework, because you all whined, as one does when one's in grade 11, about the amount of homework to be done. So work on your homework. Okay. Who doesn't have the textbook here? Okay, so somebody intelligent who does have the textbook here, go, Carla, you do. So why don't you put your hand up when I said who doesn't? You're an idiot. I should have it. Papa, won't you take a photograph of those activities and then put it on the group again?
Choice 1, the 3rd of September 2020, and second 45-minute lesson cut.